August 6th, 1996.
If anything lived in this rock, it died 3.5 billion years ago on the planet Mars. And even if it did live, it was the simplest of organisms.
To discover any kind of life elsewhere, for me, is no less of a discovery than discovering intelligent life somewhere. I mean, just life somewhere else is extraordinary.
This rock may provide a tantalizing clue to the age-old question.
What is accompanying us, at least in our own solar system, may not be an advanced being that can talk to us. But if we can find even bacteria, the answer is we're not exactly alone.
Tonight, was there, is there, could there ever have been any kind of life on Mars?
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Here's another way of looking at it. 3.6 billion years ago, there were no humans on Earth, no animals, no fish or reptiles or insects, nor indeed would there even have been any vegetation on planet Earth. If indeed there was any kind of life at all on this volcanic, inhospitable planet more than 3.5 billion years ago, it would have been the very simplest, the most fundamental life form of all, perhaps some kind of single-celled bacteria. I mention that by way of introduction to put into perspective the possible importance of the evidence discovered by a group of research scientists at Stanford University and the NASA Johnson Space Center. If, as most scientists believe, life on Earth evolved over billions of years from that most basic microscopic bacteria, then the presence of such bacteria on another planet could have enormous implications for the proposition that life of a more sophisticated variety may exist on one or more of the billions of other planets in this or one of the billions of other solar systems in the universe. There has never until now been any hard evidence that life of any kind exists on a planet other than our own. Indeed, there are skeptics who remain unconvinced of the story we're about to tell you tonight. But when this rock sample from a Martian meteorite was placed in a vacuum chamber in a Stanford University lab, and when that rock was bombarded with lasers inside the chamber, and this parenthetically is the first time this video has been publicly shown, the scientists discovered some organic molecules that are commonly found when microorganisms die. Richard Zerr headed the Stanford team that conducted those experiments, and he joins us from San Francisco. Professor Zerr, give me the headline of what you believe that you have discovered.
Ted, I believe the headline might be that we are not alone. And by that I mean that life might not be unique to Earth, but really have existed beyond Earth. In this case, ancient life of a primitive sort on the Martian planet billions of years ago, about the same time that life on Earth also seemed to be, from the fossil record, just single-celled.
Let me see if you can help me make, or at least span, what seems like a fairly enormous leap from a microbacteria 3.5 billion years ago to the possibility that life of a more complicated form may exist somewhere else in the universe. How do you make that leap?
Well, we don't ourselves understand how you go from single cells to multiple-celled animals. For it looks like 1 billion years on Earth, there was only single cells, and it took nature a long time, it seems, to figure out how to go further. We wait to see. To me, the excitement is to think that life might be very common or even ubiquitous in the universe. We're finding now that there are stars with planets, same type of solar system as we have, and that seems to be numerous. Probably the same conditions prevail on them as were true of us when life seemed to start.
Let me try and rephrase it. You tell me what kind of a grade I get. If single-cell bacteria can evolve to the life forms that we have on Earth today, it is not unreasonable to think that a similar single-cell bacteria might have evolved in a similar fashion somewhere else?
I say a grade of A.
All right, I'll take a grade of A, and I'll come back and talk to you a little bit later. Just what it is that the scientists discovered and why they are so encouraged to believe that it constitutes evidence of a basic life form once existing on the planet Mars, we'll go into a little later. Also to come on this program tonight, some thoughts from the late, great science fiction writer Isaac Asimov, who a number of years back spoke to us about the possibility of life on Mars.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Office Max.
To review, on a right triangle, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the
My
squares of the
brain is
vertices,
melting.
known as the coefficient
Luckily,
of
getting school supplies doesn't require this much concentration. Hey, just memorize this. Office Max. They've got great brand name products like Fuji zip cartridges and Smeed file folders at guaranteed low prices that won't disturb those older people that live with you. So even if school isn't your favorite place to hang, man, Office Max can get you ready. Office Max. We go to the max for you.
You look at a garage a lot differently when you see who it belongs to, especially Sears Garage, where right now all Michelin tires are on sale. When you need a great deal on tires, take a look at our garage, Sears Auto Center.
How far does your dollar go at Ace Dollar Days?
9 feet, 60 yards.
Up to 50 feet.
See how far your dollar will go during Ace Dollar Days. Ace is a place with the helpful hardware folks.
Spend this week with World News Tonight, and you may live longer and better. Tomorrow, good news, a cure for impotence on ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. A front-page murder from 50 years ago, and he's been in jail ever since. Now, Sam Donaldson reveals maybe they got the wrong man. Primetime Wednesday.
This week at Just for Feet, a jam-up sale on Reebok basketball shoes. The Reebok Swingman Low that was $64.95, now $39.99. The Swingman Mid was $74.95, now just $39.99. And Swingman High was $79.95, only $39.99. Or get the Sean Kemp Kamikaze 2 limited electrifying selection of colors that was $84.95, now only $39.99. This week at Just for Feet, where your 13th pair is free.
Sometimes people are shocked to find discount store prices at a first-class operation like H.H. Gregg. It's a different kind of sticker shock at Gregg.
That price has to be a mistake.
Shh. No mistake, and you still get all of our great services, too.
How can they afford to sell so cheap?
Who knows? H.H. Gregg, first-class service at discount store prices.
Holy Toledo!
There are about a dozen Martian rocks here on Earth that scientists are currently studying, but this one is different. Here's ABC's Ned Potter.
16 million years ago, something awesome happened on the planet Mars. It may have been an asteroid that crashed into the surface. Pieces of Martian rock went flying in all directions, some even out into space, where they drifted around the solar system for millions of years. 13,000 years ago, at least one chunk came crashing to Earth near the South Pole. Scientists found the rock in 1984 and did not realize what they had. But now they've analyzed it, and colleagues like Dr. Richard Berenson are amazed to read their conclusions.
And the results seem to be the most suggestive finding in all of human history, that we here on Earth may not, in fact, be alone.
The piece of rock is smaller than a football, but when the researchers cut into it, they found molecules called hydrocarbons, which are common building blocks of life. In a paper to be published in the journal Science, they write that the hydrocarbons might be the remains of bacteria that once lived in the Martian soil. The paper warns those hydrocarbons might not suggest life at all, just residue from when Mars first formed 5 billion years ago. Scientists like Alan Treeman are very excited, but also very cautious.
What they've found are some traces, chemical and mineral traces, that might possibly have come from life, but might equally well not have. And so we all need to be very careful before jumping the gun on this.
But here's the possible clincher. Those hydrocarbons seem to have formed in the presence of water, and American spacecraft have shot close-ups of the deep channels on Mars that many believe are dried-up riverbeds.
If we're not alone, and if Earth is not the only place in the universe with life, I think that'll force people to take pause.
Astronomer Neil deGrasse Tyson says it's not too early to think about the philosophical implications.
People on Earth have an egocentric view of themselves and of their position in the universe, and I think the discovery of life elsewhere would help to sort of reset the mental state of human beings on Earth.
If in one solar system, where we have a pretty ordinary star, the sun, there's at least 2 life sites, then what do we make out of the hundreds of billions of other stars within our own galaxy, and there are billions of other galaxies?
Science fiction has long reveled in such stuff, mostly suggesting that aliens would do terrible things to us. The NASA findings, of course, suggest nothing close to that. At most, some microscopic organisms that died off a long, long time ago. Still, it sets the writer's mind reeling.
Life is really a rare thing.
Science fiction writer Kim Stanley Robinson.
So to see it happening on another planet next door, I should think it would just be wonderful news for everyone.
Deep in the human spirit, there's a yearning to answer one of the most fundamental questions human beings have been pondering for centuries, I suppose since the earliest person. Am I alone? And now at last we may begin to give tentative answers.
But more are needed. 20 years ago, when the U.S. landed 2 Viking probes on Mars, they found rocks and rusty soil, but nothing organic. Why did Viking come up dry? Are there more clues on or beneath the surface? One meteorite that came here from Mars does not tell us about the whole planet. So already this fall, NASA plans to launch a new fleet of probes toward the red planet. One of them, called Mars Pathfinder, will land and launch a small high-tech rover. The real test of this week's report will be if other experiments back it up. In decades past, philosophers predicted that the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe would change us all subtly, that we would need to be prepared for this day. If the new findings prove true, are we ready? This is Ned Potter for Nightline.
When we come back, we'll be joined once again by Professor Richard Zare and also by astronomer and astrophysicist Dr. Richard Berenson.
We're in the car business, not the document business. That's why we use an outside specialist. Like us, they're quick and precise. I don't even have to go there. They have a dedicated account manager who comes right to my office. I like it when things get done without my having to worry. Keeps my head off the platter.
Every day, over 200,000 businesses use Kinko's, the new way to office.
Let's go surfing now. Everybody's learning how.
This summer in Atlanta, one of the new events was surfing.
Some honeys will be coming along.
With AT&T WorldNet service.
Totally tubular.
AT&T WorldNet makes it easy for anyone.
This is most excellent.
To get on the internet and surf.
Excellento pimento.
I'm gonna take you surfing.
Nothing but net.
Surfing now. Everybody's learning how. 1-800-WORLD-NET.
Tomorrow, it's news that could rock our planet. Was there life on Mars? NASA reveals we may not have been alone.
That's tomorrow on Good Morning America.
Remember, recession, jobs lost. The Dole GOP bill tries to deny nearly 1 million families unemployment benefits. Higher interest rates, 10 million unemployed. With a Dole amendment, Republicans try to block more job training. Today, we make more autos than Japan. Record construction jobs, mortgage rates down, 10 million new jobs, more women-owned companies than ever. The president's plan, education, job training, economic growth for a better future.
Volunteers are needed by these agencies. First Steps Heads Up, a preschool program, needs volunteers to spend time with children during playtime and lunch. The Rape and Sexual Abuse Center needs volunteers to serve as counselors for the 24-hour crisis line. Telephones may be answered at home and training is provided. Peace, a domestic violence intervention program, needs telephone volunteers for their crisis line. Training is provided. Nashville Read, a literacy program for adults, needs volunteers to tutor, assist with special events, or serve as speakers. Call 255-4982 for more information. If you are a nonprofit agency and need volunteers, write to WKRN at this address or call 256-8272.
Joining us again now live from San Francisco, Stanford Professor Richard Zare, and joining us here in Washington, American University astronomer and astrophysicist Dr. Richard Berenson. Dr. Zare, we have set the table, but throughout our conversation we've been saying, if all of this is true, how confident are you that your findings do indeed suggest that life once existed on Mars?
Ted, I really am quite confident. I think the evidence is strongly suggestive. Incidentally, the evidence is a collaboration between people at Johnson Space Center and the people at Stanford. And there's more to the story than so far you're reporting, which I think will come out at a press conference at NASA headquarters tomorrow, including, I think, some very dramatic pictures of what looks like fossil-like images that show egg-shaped and tubular objects that are all in conjunction, spatially associated with the chemical and mineralogical signatures that we're finding.
I think what has become very clear this evening is that certainly all of us who've been talking on this program so far would like very much for it to be true. I think the human race has sort of yearned to believe that there is some other life form out there somewhere. As a scientist, though, you have an obligation to engage in very rigorous testing. When you say it is all suggestive, on a scale of 1 to 10, how sure are you?
Let me answer, Ted, first of all, that in science we're really good at disproving things, and we're very poor at proving things. So various so-called theories, theory of relativity and so forth, go on, even though people can't think of anything better. So things will remain a hypothesis or theory for quite some time.
But
you do not have, in this case, a smoking gun.
In terms of your level of confidence, though?
In terms of my level of confidence, let's make it a 9.
9 is pretty good. Dr. Berenson, Ned Potter ended his piece with the rather dramatic rhetorical question, are we ready if this is true? Why shouldn't we be ready?
Oh, I think there's a great deal of fear, as you showed with the science fiction films, where the one image is that there's intelligent life and it comes here to do us harm. The other alternative is that it comes here in peace, like the famous film E.T. I think the really profound philosophical and maybe even theological question is, can we accept the notion that in this vast cosmos somehow we are not at the very center of it, which was the worldview for a very long time.
Well, I thought Copernicus did away with that.
Well, he did, but it's been debated for a long time, and I would like to believe that with the discovery of even a simple fossil of a bacteria on Mars, it would teach us what we ought to know all along. And that is that what bonds us here on Earth, all of the diverse peoples here, really is much more profound than what seems to separate us, and that we Earthlings really have a great deal in common. And if we should happen to find that there's life elsewhere, and I've read this paper of this team, it looks to me like they've checked and rechecked and double-checked, and I think the 9 estimate might be a good one on reliability of it. Then it's very provocative.
Professor Zare, you might like to know that Dr. Berenson and I were chatting this afternoon, and he said, 100 years from now, Bob Dole's new tax plan and tax cut may barely rate a footnote in the history books, and this may have a whole chapter unto itself. You think that could be an exaggeration?
Well, I think actually, Ted, that there are certain defining moments of an age and of a period, that events that capture uniquely the spirit, once understood, really change the course of history. And the discovery, if it proves to be such, that we're not alone, would be such a defining moment. It also means to me that we should have the spirit, the pioneering spirit, to continue to explore in many directions. You just don't know what you'll find. Can you imagine people are worrying now whether or not we can support the South Pole station that NSF runs and so forth? And yet, it was going to the South Pole, going into the Antarctica, that one found, Ted, this type of object that I'm holding in my hand, a piece of Mars. Can you imagine a piece of Mars so close to me, and perhaps the closest I'll come to Mars?
Actually,
we have to have that
we're
same
just seeing
spirit
a
of
tiny little
exploration.
vial. If you could hold that
Yes.
up for a second so that we can ask the cameraman perhaps to zoom in.
Can you see the particles in it?
I'm not sure if we can, but I guess that's about as close as we're going to get to Mars for tonight. Dr. Berenson, let me just put to you the notion of Dr. Zell was just talking about exploration and at the South Pole. You were talking to me this afternoon about exploration on Mars itself. Just go into that a little bit. What's going to happen with this next mission to Mars?
Well, there are 3 spacecraft going to Mars later this year, 2 American, 1 Russian. One of the American will carry the first robotic rover to roam around on the surface of another planet. It has a wonderful name. It was a nationwide contest to come up with a name. A schoolgirl suggested naming it after the woman who lived in the South during the Civil War, who changed her name and walked around the South giving lectures about the evil of slavery, changed her name to Sojourner Truth. And so the first human robotic craft ever to explore the surface of another planet robotically, move around, will be Sojourner. Sojourner and a whole host of other experiments in the next year or two should begin to confirm or disconfirm this discovery now. I think by the year 2000, we will have definitive evidence whether there was ever fossil life on Mars, and probably the discovery of a vastly larger number of planets outside of our own system.
Professor Berenson, Professor Zare, let me thank you both very much for being with us this evening. Certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
When we come back, the thoughts of science fiction author Isaac Asimov on the planet Mars.
Thanks to Sprint Business, there's a company that makes more flowers pop up instantly all over the world.
Sprint helps us grow faster.
Because FTD uses Sprint's global data network, now florists transmit orders instantly between 143 countries. So, FTD processes flower arrangements in half the time.
And business has blossomed all over the world.
We'll help your business do more business. Call Sprint Business.
If you were to take every honor, every award, everything positive that's been said about the Toyota Camry, and lay them end to end, you'd probably ask yourself, why did I do that? Better to drive one yourself and come up with a few accolades of your own. The 1996 Camry, the gold standard from Toyota.
Good morning, guys. Just when you think your diarrhea medicine is working.
Oh boy, what's wrong?
It can let you down. But you can count on Imodium AD to stop diarrhea, often in just 1 dose, instead of dose after dose, more than 1/3 of a bottle of the pink stuff. And Imodium AD is even better than the leading prescription.
I told you we should have stopped for Imodium AD.
Imodium AD, 1 dose relief you can count on.
Today, I'm going to meetings in Paris, Prague, and Toledo without leaving my chair. The world is evolving and connecting at the same time. You don't even need an office. If you can think it, you can go do it in absolute full digital color. There are more ideas inside of Kinko's today than in any office space in America. Sometimes I go just to be with people.
Hi, Howard.
Every day, over 200,000 businesses use Kinko's, the new way to office.
Your favorite comedy stars got their start in stand-up. So we at ABC were thinking, maybe we're onto something. Now it's Lisa Ann Walters' turn in her very own show.
The happy mommy is a good mommy, and a bitter old resentful mommy is, well, let's face it, grandma.
She's a wife, a mother, and assistant DA.
I can only assure you I will not be weighed down by my ovaries.
I like that. Lisa Ann Walters stars in Life's Work, coming in September to ABC.
Isaac Asimov died several years ago, but in 1988, Nightline producer Herb O'Connor spoke with the great science fiction author, who then shared some of his thoughts on our fascination with the planet Mars.
Mars is a red planet. The red is equated with blood, so that Mars has always been named for the god of war. When an Italian astronomer, Virginio Schiaparelli, detected narrow dark lines on Mars and called them canali, meaning channels, like the English channel. It is translated as canals, which are different from channels because canals are man-made, artificial. So that the feeling arose there might not only be life on Mars, but advanced life. This combined with the earlier feeling about Mars as a war planet made one think that not only was there an advanced civilization there, but that it might be inimical. And then in 1898 came the real clincher when H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds. It was the very first story of interplanetary warfare. He really presented a frightening picture of Martians taking over Great Britain. He meant it as a social satire. And so, of course, he was showing how Great Britain, the greatest imperialist nation of all, might feel if people who were as advanced over them as they were over Africans would come over and simply start taking over Great Britain without any regard for the natives, whatever.
A bulletin is handed me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. Now the first machine reaches the shore. He stands watching, looking over the city.
But in 1938, 40 years after he'd written the story, by which time we should have known better, when Orson Welles put on his program about the Martians landing in New Jersey, announcing quite clearly that this was fiction. Lots of people ran for their lives.
I'm extremely surprised to learn that a story which has become familiar to children through the medium of comic strips and many succeeding novels and adventure stories should have had such an immediate and profound effect upon radio listeners.
After H.G. Wells, there were so many science fiction stories written about Martian invasions, or Martians as villains, and in the movies there was children's serials and so on, that Martian became a kind of code word for some dreadful aliens who were absolutely irresistible and evil. Then in 1965, 904 passed by and took the first close-up pictures of Mars. No canals, just craters.
And liftoff! Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
What we have to do is use the shuttle to build the space station, use the space station to really exploit nearby space. From the shuttle to the space station, to structures in space and space settlements, and a mining station on the moon, and then to reaching out for Mars and the asteroids and beyond. And I imagine that in the end it won't be Earthmen who'll be heading out to Mars on a large scale, the asteroids, the outer planets, but it'll be these settlers. It'll be the Vikings of the 21st and 22nd century.
A few of the thoughts, dreams, and recommendations of the late author Isaac Asimov. And that's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you'd like a transcript or video cassette of this or any other edition of Nightline, please call 1-800-913-3434.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.